program designed to explore in-depth interviews with writers to hear that words have voices. Our hostess for today's program is Teresa Miller, Executive Director for the Oklahoma Center for Poets and Writers at OSU Tulsa.
Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. This is the first of a two-part interview with best-selling author Annie Lamott. Thanks for being here, Annie.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
For a young person, you have an impressive body of work. Does that sometimes overwhelm you to think of all the books you've...
I was 50 a couple weeks ago, so
That's young.
And my back is hurting, and so I'm not feeling like a young person with a big body of work. But yes, I'm very surprised. I'll publish my 10th book next spring, and I'm sort of astonished to say that out loud.
Well, it's pretty astonishing. It's a wonderful thing. I thought we'd start by talking about your nonfiction. I know fiction's your first love. At least it used to be. Is it still your first love?
No.
Not? Okay, well...
I will always love reading fiction. Reading fiction is my first love, but it's a lot harder for me than nonfiction, and it takes us... We'll talk about that later, but it was my first love. Yes, but I prefer writing nonfiction now.
Oh, that's a very interesting transformation. Mm-hmm. Well, certainly your nonfiction books have just done splendidly. I get calls all the time from people who hear you're coming, going to be on the show, and they say, you know, these books changed my life. And I was looking at rereading, actually, Operating Instructions, and Modern Library picked this as one of the top 100 books of the 20th century.
Yeah.
What is it about this book that resonates with people still?
Well, I think it was such a surprise when it came out for a mother to actually say that it was much, much more confusing an experience than they'd been led to believe based on the other baby books and other reports of mothering. And I just tried to tell the truth. When I used to teach, I told my students to write the books they'd like to come upon. And I would have given anything to read a book when I had a colicky infant that just told the truth. That was real. I mean, there's nothing that can compare with real, and that could have made me laugh out loud about the stuff that made me feel like I just was such a loser and a failure as a mother. And if it could have made me laugh and broken down that sense of isolation, I really would have done anything. So I went ahead and wrote it, and I think for all those years, mothers have been waiting for someone to just tell their stories. Yeah.
Well, it's a terrific book, and even non-mothers, I think, can enjoy it because of the process and the rejoicing over life. You say in the acknowledgments, and I'm always a snoopy person, I love to read acknowledgments, and that this book would never have happened if your agent hadn't insisted you type up the journal you were keeping. So this is a for real journal.
It's a for real journal that's also got stuff added to it, but everything in there existed in a little journal I kept, but then sometimes in the journal I would just scribble a note or two, a word, a person's name, and then when I was typing it up I'd go, oh wait, that was Sam's baptism, who was there? And I call people, who was there? What do you remember? What did we eat? I don't remember, and stuff like that. So I definitely filled it in.
But this wasn't just some memories you had that you decided to go back and recast and draw.
It was day to day.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That makes it more real and vivid too.
It's also really easy to do it. I used to also tell my students that when they didn't know what to do, just to write a letter every day. Or I've never been a journal writer. I don't write journals now. But Sam's father's best friend had given me a journal and said, write down a sentence every day. And the trick about writing is that if you write down a sentence, you usually end up writing a lot more.
Well, it's again, a terrific book. When you look back at this book, is it sort of like going through a photo album in a way?
Yes, that was the intention, in fact, and was to create a photo album in words and images of this precious, difficult, crazy, beautiful first year. And so that's the thing I would have to say I'm most glad about, because otherwise I read it and I think, boy, does that person sound like a nut, or did I say that, or what's Sam going to do when he reads that? But I love what you just pointed out, and in fact, I'm writing an introduction for a second collection of essays like Traveling Mercies, and it inspired me to write the same style of a literary photo album so that I can capture some of Sam before it's gone, because he's growing so old now.
Has Sam read Operating Instructions?
He's read parts of it. He's not a huge reader, and but some of his friends have read it, and so they're always telling him about sections they've read, and so sometimes he'll pick it up. He'll say, oh, I'm going to go downstairs and read your book now, Mom, and he'll read about 2 pages, and he'll say, "Oh, that was a great story. I think I'll stop there."
Well, he's almost forever in my mind a little kid.
Yes,
And how old is Sam?
He's almost 15.
15 years
Yeah.
old, and I still think of him as a little boy. When you were going over your journal and getting it ready for publication, did you make any editorial changes based on the fact that Sam would read this one day?
I did. I took out some of the angrier stuff. Some of the stuff I had put down was just furious at Sam's father, who I hadn't heard from, and I thought that's not going to help anyone, and especially not going to help Sam.
Right.
And I wanted it to be like a love letter to Sam, even as it was something that I hoped would help mothers not feel quite as desperate. But I left a little of the rage in, which I'm glad about, because I love rage. I love when people, especially women, will just talk about how angry they really are and not pretend to have such good manners and stuff it all down and pay the price of all that stuffed feeling. But I did edit it. I edited out some stuff that I thought would just make the people at my church crazy and that would really hurt my mother's feelings.
Sure.
So there was a lot to choose from, and I left in the stuff that I felt was most real, which is not always the most explosive.
You mentioned writing letters is a good way to get started writing. You've also talked about writing as a present to people.
Yes.
And at what point did you realize operating instructions was a present to your best friend Pammy and to Sam?
Well, Pammy got sick pretty early on. I don't remember exactly how old Sam was, but maybe 9 months. But when Sam was 9 months, but I had just been. I got into the habit. You know, they say it takes 3 weeks to establish a new habit, whether that's writing in a journal or dental flossing. And and I had the habit, and then Pammy got sick, and I think it was a little earlier than 9 months. And then I realized that I had these precious memories of the two of us raising this tiny baby, and some of it was so funny, and she had such a hilarious way with words. Same with my younger brother, Steve, who's in the book a lot, and I just felt like, I just wanted to honor and thank them with continuing to collect, like beach glass, these daily ordinary stories of a mom, a best friend, and an uncle of this one little guy who didn't have certain things, like a dad, or we didn't have any money, but he did have this even more beautiful and healing, comforting thing, which was a funny little non-nuclear family around him. So, but when Pammy got sick, I just started to feel, I just wanted to capture every moment with her. Then I was sending it off to my agent, I just typed it up finally. I have illegible handwriting, if that gives anyone comfort. And I started typing it up, and I sent it to my agent. And I remember I got back a note, just a torn up bit of scrap paper, and it said, "I'm crying as I write that. I write this," and in fact some of the ink was smeared. And she said, her own kids were grown up by then. She said, "It's just piercing me with the memories of my own children." And I thought, wow, I didn't expect for it to be published. I was actually working on a novel too while I wrote this. So it was all that sort of hand of God, heavy quirk level that makes you feel that you must be onto something.
And Pammy got to read it, didn't she?
Pammy got to read it, and she actually even got to read it in bound galley. So she knew it was going to be published, and that it was dedicated to her. And yeah, it was a real godsend. And in fact, my father, my first book I wrote as a love letter to him when he had brain cancer. It was a autobiographical novel about that, Hard Laughter. And he was well enough to when I discovered I was going to be published by Viking, to celebrate that and to really celebrate that, because I'd been writing for a long time. And then he also got to read the finished book, and he was still well enough in his mind to read that. So it's just been, I've been so lucky and blessed. So yeah.
That's right. You know, one of the things that I like so much about your nonfiction, you're enmeshed in life. I mean, you're involved in the messiness of life. And I love the subtitle to Bird by Bird, which is some instructions on writing in life. Do you think some writers, particularly young writers, have this sort of false notion that you have to remove yourself from life, find the ivory tower or the retreat, and to the detriment of their writing?
Well, I think almost all writers think that as soon as certain things fall into place, then they'll really be able to get to work, or then they'll really be able to achieve the kind of work they'd been dreaming of. And so when I was teaching, I'd have people of every age, and older women, teenage boys and the gamut, and I'd always listen to their excuses, and I'd be very nice about it. But they'd say, "Well, as soon as I graduate," or the older ones would say, "As soon as my kids have graduated, then," or "As soon as we move out," this one guy would say, "As soon as my wife and I are retiring, and as soon as we move up to the Russian River, it's much quieter, much more conducive." I said, "You're never going to write. If you're going to write, you have to write now. You do it as a debt of honor. You do it now. You do it poorly if it comes out poorly, but you make the time. You honor that thing inside of you that wants to tell your stories, and you do it now." And I think a lot of young writers think that they'll write a few things that don't get published, and then they'll find a publisher, and then then they'll start making a living too. No, I didn't make a living until my 5th book, Operating Instructions. I was always either cleaning houses or teaching tennis or waiting tables, and there's so many dreams involved with being a published writer. And also the biggest of all is the dream that if you get published, you'll feel differently about yourself, and you'll just feel like $1 million, and that you're a real writer. And the fact is, publication's devastating to people. It's wonderful to get published, and it's devastating to people's self-esteem. And you think that it means that you're going to get a big advance for your 2nd book, and people know who you are. Well, there's 25,000 hardback books published for the public a year, not even trade titles. And it gets very easy to get lost. My first book, Hard Laughter, which got some great critical response, sold 3,000 copies initially, and other of my books have sold they published 7,000 operating instructions, which is nothing. And then it was this fluke Times bestseller, but it was just had a life of its own then after that. But the odds of making it are so slim, and you have to be writing because you have this thing inside of you, this gift that you're working with and drawing forth and developing and purifying and getting feedback on, so that you can not just burnish it so it looks good if you send it off, but so that it can be rich and full of depth like good writing should be. So,
do you think it's a mistake then to write to the market? Write something you think that's just going to sell, trying to get in on a trend.
I hear other people that work with writers really focus on writing to the market and saying you really need to know who you're writing for, and I'm sure that's probably true, and it's probably true for a lot of people. That would not be the gift that I had to offer writing students, is not to think in those terms. But I don't mean to say that it's not an honorable thing to do. The publishing has changed so much. When I was young, when I was 20, say 30 years ago, there was still an old-style sense of the publishing industry, and that you would meet your editors and fly to New York, and they'd have suede patches on their wool jackets or their corduroy jackets, and they would find a few writers, and they'd nurture their gifts as a writer, and you get published, and then they'd really be in it with you. And it's so different now. I mean, the editors at big publishing houses are marketing, and they're figuring out what's going to sell, and they're working on covers before your work has been typeset. You know, they're working on the covers, and they're working to make sure that it's a book that will be bought by the chains. And so it's very different. But I would only be able to encourage people from the perspective of that you do it as really a literary means of achieving salvation and wholeness, and that you write because you want to be a part of the writing world, and that you want to be with other writers, you want to read other writers, you want to read the correspondence. I mean, I'm sure this was true for you too, that when you're a young writer, you read all the correspondence you can find in the journals of writers, and the letters of Maxwell Perkins, and all the editors, all the letters that writers wrote to their editors, so that you could study process, and you found yourself in that. You kind of figured out what it meant, and setbacks, who knew, you know, and poverty, who knew, but they did it anyway because they wanted to meet with other writers and to talk about writing. It was like a calling, like it's a certain kind of monastery, often with a lot more alcohol, but so, and now if I say to people, you should read all the journals that Virginia Woolf wrote, you should write all these journals and all these letters and Rilke's letters, and they look at me like I'm crazy because there's so many reference books on how to publish a thriller, how to publish a comic book, on a household book or whatever. So, But I know people who've been writing now in writing groups for 10 years, and they are still meeting with the same 3 or 4 people every 2 weeks, and they are the people who are having the joy and the continuity and the being filled by the work that seems like it's depleting you even as you do it every day. And that's where the payoff is.
There's a wonderful chapter in Bird by Bird about the moral point of view. And I wonder if you might speak to a minute, because you are a spiritual person, to the difference between having a moral stance and moralizing.
Oh, well, let's see, that's a really good question. I probably haven't read that chapter since I wrote it, although maybe I'll read it tonight. But for me, as I said, I always told people they should write what they really would love to find. And if I'm reading something, I've come upon something or been given something, and someone's moralizing or being moralistic and telling me as if they have insider information how I should live or behave and the correct way to feel about a certain thing, God, I'm going to run screaming for my cute little life because I can't stand for people to talk to me as if they know, or as if it's, you know, from God or from some higher authority. And but a moral point of view, I think, means that there's a compass inside you that turns you towards a way of being in the world that is not scrambling and scrabbling towards your own self-achievement and your own sense of mastery and fame, and that instead has a sense of moral responsibility to tell the truth, especially in an era like right now, I would say, where, boy, we're starved for some truth. We're starved for what's really going on in the world, and what it really means to us and what it really means for our children and our children's children. And I think by a moral sense it means a deep commitment to try to be a reliable pair of eyes on the world and to say, this is what I make of it, and this is what I've seen, and I've come to believe that you really shouldn't pay too much attention to this because that guy never tells the truth, or this woman is completely in it because she loves the sound of her own voice or whatever. So a moral point of view to me is just the most precious voice from which a writer can begin, which is to be one of the storytellers of the culture, like our forebearers were, almost in the caves, you know, to keep the stories of the culture alive, to tell stories that give life, to give that both by having information that helps the tribe and the culture stay alive, and by trying new things, and by going a little further than anyone's gone before, and going out there and saying, I know we've always told the story this way, but I have to say, do you have a minute? And that's what the good storytellers say. They say, do you have a minute? Because I saw something, and it's a trip. And so that's what I mean by the moral point of view. The stories in the position that give life, that heal, that give hope in dark times, that hold up a tiny bit of light for others to see by.
Your book, Traveling Mercies, which is about your faith, grew out of your columns for Salon.com, which has got to be a fun forum for you. What made you decide to focus particularly on your faith? You reference your faith in almost everything that you write. Why did you decide to do Traveling Mercies?
Well, I do love to write about religious faith and spiritual faith, partly because I'm so starved for people that don't tell me what to think and don't have God's own take on, say, the Bible or on our spiritual truth of our identity. And so I started to write these little pieces, these short essays at Salon that were from a different perspective than most people at Salon, which was not focusing on the political or the cultural, but saying, I'm just one kind of motley old sober lush who is doing the best she can, and for some reason I've been blessed with a sense of humor, and I can take stuff that just would break your heart unless you had someone to tell it to in a way where you both end up laughing. So, and to me, that is the most spiritual stuff at all, the stuff that tends to one another's spirits, that comes from our own spirit and is maybe a little bit less well packaged than the self that we present to the world. So I started writing these pieces, and people really liked them, and I really love the shorter form. I love 1,500 and 2,000 word pieces, and I love to read them too. And so pretty soon I was off and running, and I had a deadline of every 2 weeks I needed to have 1,500 words done, and it would take me all of a week. It took a long time, and then I was also working on my novels, Crooked Little Heart, and then Blue Shoe, while I was writing these salon pieces. So I just had to get over the fear of that I would sound sanctimonious, you know, or that the people, I'm a very committed left-wing activist in the world, and most left-wing activists aren't also Christians. So I had to get over the fear of being judged, or by people judging me in the press and saying, oh, you know, it's her little blind spot. And then I thought, who cares, you know, and I can't spend my entire life trying to write stuff so that the New York literary critical establishment will approve of me, or so that people won't think I'm some sort of a Christian nut, because I am some sort of a Christian nut, and I also have very strong political feelings. And so little by little I just noticed that there was sort of some kind of collagen connecting these disparate pieces, and the collagen was my own faith. And it's been very hard fought, and my own sense of self-esteem, which has been even harder fought. And so little by little I just started to play with them. You know, it's like when I'm working well, my body language is so much more relaxed. I'm not sitting there grimly at the desk trying to self-will it into happening. I'm playing with it like wet clay more, and I started moving pieces around, and all of a sudden I discovered there was a piece about Sam's 7th birthday. I don't know if you remember it, but it's about him having been offered a chance to paraglide up in this writing conference in some valley, and then his 8th birthday had come and gone, and we had gone to our little beach at San Quentin, outside San Quentin, which I think is the world's safest beach in the world, and since there are armed guards about 200 feet away, and we'd built an altar, because we're into building altars, and the dog had run around. All of a sudden I had a bookend, you know, I had a 7th birthday and 8th birthday, and then the pieces started falling into shape. There were several on church, there were several on family, my mom, my dad, the woman who put dreadlocks in my hair, which is called Sister, and then a piece on Sam called Baby. And little by little, it's like the pieces kind of were helping get themselves written and kind of knew where they belonged. And so I just listened to that voice, and all of a sudden it came together.
You talk about the two prayers that you have, help, 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 and thank you, thank you, thank you.
And the third prayer is, wow. When you're just feeling so mentally ill and stifled, and you go outside. Usually it happens for me when I go outside, and I take a long, deep breath, and I see something exquisitely beautiful, and I go, wow.
Does that happen a lot?
Yes.
Can you tell us about a recent wow?
Yes, I can. There's a little place, an open space hillside, about a 10-minute walk from my house. In fact, I'm finishing up this piece for the introduction of the new collection that's like Traveling Mercies, and if I finish it in the next hour, I'll read it tonight. I mean, that's how recent it is.
Wow.
But I had given a sermon at St. Andrew on Rahab, who's the prostitute in the book of Joshua, who is not a Israelite, but who makes a choice that springs from her heart, not from what the culture's told her, not from the people of Jericho, who are pretty warlike and idolatrous, but who it springs from her heart, and she makes a decision, and she ends up being of the lineage of King David in the New Testament. She's one of the 4 women mentioned in the lineage of so-and-so begat, who begat, who begat, begat. Oh, a woman was involved in all that begatting. Oh, and Rahab's one of those 4 women, and Mary, and it's the lineage from David to Jesus. And so this prostitute is called to do something that saves her family and helps the Christ be born. So I had given this sermon and then gone home, and it turned out Sam hadn't done his homework, and I just lost my mind and sort of attacked him, sort of. And I mean, I just was yelling and mad, and he was mad and awful. And I finally remembered that the third prayer is wow. And it was drizzling outside, and I loved to take naps, but I couldn't think, and put the dog on a leash and walked up to the open space, and I sat up there. And at first it was funny because I was trying to look holy, and I just given a sermon at my church, and I was trying kind of grimly looking holy, and what happened was a woman with all these dogs came along who immediately started barking at us, and I stepped in dog dew, like the single least spiritual thing on this planet, and it finally got me laughing, and it got me out of trying to look holy, and and I was up in this exquisite light drizzle where you can see the entire world from up there. You can see rural farmlands, you can see the mountains and foothills of Mount Tam, and I started laughing, and it was like I felt like God had reached down and touched me because I could breathe again, and then it became a story. And I went home and I said to Sam, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was so awful." He said, "Oh, I'm sorry too." I said, "Look at you, you're all wet." But it came out just like I would have said it to him a few years before, and so it completed a circle, and then we were both able to laugh and, you know, sit down on the couch and eat wheat thins, which to me, to be able to feel sweetly again when you've been so angry, and to eat wheat thins as communion is about as spiritual as life gets.
It is about as spiritual as it gets. As a matter of fact, you make me want some wheat thins. You mentioned C.S. Lewis in your book, and he came to Christianity reluctantly as well. Do you think the fact that you both came to Christianity hesitantly makes you more credible witnesses?
Oh, thank you. I think so, and I really love him. When I was starting to feel the pull and the nudge of becoming a Christian, C.S. Lewis's books were very meaningful to me, but especially Mere Christianity.
I like that book.
And I couldn't believe that somebody so smart and so funny was a Christian, because I was raised to be an atheist by, you know, devout atheists, and I was raised to believe that Christians just must not be thinking clearly, or that it was like believing in people who were into pyramid power or something. And so I was 31 when I converted, drunk, and then I got sober a year later when I was 32. And I was very much drawn to people who had been brought kicking and screaming. Another person was Malcolm Muggeridge, the great BBC iconoclast who couldn't stand Christians. And then he went, I don't know if you know the story of his conversion, but he did a interview with Mother Teresa, and he went to Calcutta, and it totally broke that hard plastic shell around him that kept everything out of his heart, and he fell in love with Mother Teresa, and he fell in love with Jesus, and he became a great writer of Christianity like C.S. Lewis did.
Thank you, Anne, for being with us today. Thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.